Welcome to the GC BizCast, a production of J. Whitney Bunting College of Business at Georgia College and State University. Here we discuss the important topics with business leaders and educators. We produce weekly podcasts from our beautiful campus in Milledgeville, Georgia. We're excited that you've joined us. Our conversation should inform and entertain you. The views expressed are the views of the individuals on the program and do not represent the views of Georgia College and State University. So let's get started.
Hey everybody, I'm Sruti Sajja.
And I'm Maggie Malcolm.
And welcome to the Business Bobcast. We have a really special guest today. Dr. Geddy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Dr. Meg Geddy, and I am a lecturer of business communication in the College of Business.
How did teaching English aid you to teach business communications?
Well, teaching English taught me how to punctuate, which my students still don't necessarily know. But we're getting there. But it taught me how to put words together and to play with words and all that. But when I was teaching at Southern, I was teaching academic writing. So it was the writing that you all learned in composition, or was the writing you learned in lit classes, where it's better to use a dollar word than to use a nickel word, which we talk about in my business communications class. And so in English, when you're teaching English, it's better for students to use the word scintilla as opposed to tiny, or plethora as opposed to many. And so one of the things that when I was there, that all made sense. I was an English professor, so that was what I was teaching. But then when I got out of it and got into content writing, I was like, ooh, wait a second. Business writing makes so much more sense as the kind of day-to-day writing we should all know. And the fact that it's more like what we say and what we mean than... So I talk in my class, and Maggie, I'm hoping will remember this. Academic writing is where your audience is your professor, and you're supposed to dazzle your professor. Yes, I understand what we talked about. I understand what this means. I understand, but it's only one-on-one. When you're writing in business, you're writing for so many people, and you're writing for people who don't know what it is that you're talking about. You can't dazzle them because they have no idea, whereas the professor knew exactly what you were, they had assigned, knew what you read, knew the information, but the business people don't. So the fun is being able to say, let's look at who our audience is and write so they understand and only have to read it once and don't have to decipher language or words, because you want to make sure that they understand that once and done and still do business with you.
Yes.
There's the big deal that you want them to do business with you. So, and I probably just jumped ahead for any of the questions that
no,
you were perfect.
So okay.
Yeah, I do remember being in your class and there kind of being a period of like an unlearning process. Everything that we had taught in high school, you know, the AP classes, the dual enrollment. It was just, how fancy can I make this sound? How many vocabulary words do I know?
Exactly.
And then going into your class, I thought I just knew what was happening, you know, just diving away. And having to kind of unlearn, especially probably the first month of your class, this is not how we're doing it anymore.
Right.
And that was a big adjustment.
Yeah, and the whole idea of making sure that you're like, I know scintilla is a good word, but it's not a good word for here because my audience wouldn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's huge.
So business was not something that you were...
I never thought I was going to be in business. I always thought I was going to be in academia. Always thought I was just going to be an academic writer. Just, I was even a tenured, got to be an assistant professor and went, why? So I was actually relatively happy when my husband got moved because I was like, this isn't really, I want to teach. And that wasn't what they were letting me do. They wanted me to write, wanted me to publish. I was like, I don't want to do that. So it all worked out. I mean, I guess God was looking after us, and it all worked out that we got to go where we went. But then getting into business, I was terrified because I don't know anything about business. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I realized, it's just language. It's just putting words together.
And you already knew how to do that. And
it's also making it clear to somebody, which, having taught, you can know how to break stuff down for people. So that was easy. That was I really liked being able to, even when I was just doing content writing, I was still teaching because I was telling people, do me a favor and try not to write like that ever again. Let's try to write like this.
Yes.
They never could, but at least they were attempting it. Or the smarter ones would just give me a kind of a bullet point list and say, could you write me the email? Because they couldn't take the time, because it does, like you said, you have to unlearn things that you've been doing all along.
Yeah.
You're sitting there going, well, no wonder nobody likes my business.
Right.
I'm not making sense when I write. So, but and when I came here, learning to see what the students needed and to look at that audience, that they can't be writing to me as professor. They can only be writing to me as potential client or potential colleague or whatever.
Yeah.
And we put it in that context, it starts to make so much more sense. And they're like, oh, wait a second. And you start seeing light bulbs go off and going, oh, yay, people understand. They can figure this out.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so true.
What do you think is like the most important like aspect of why someone needs to learn how to write plainly? Like, what is that?
The biggest thing is that if you don't write for an audience that you're allowing to only have to read once. So clarity, conciseness, being as direct as possible, being as clear as possible, so that they don't have to call you and say, I got your email, but I don't know what you're talking about. Or I got your email and I still don't know how much your widgets cost. You're sitting there going, okay, well then obviously there was a problem with that audience idea. Whereas when we were writing in English, we were writing for ourselves.
Yes,
we were kind
absolutely.
of tearing poems apart or novels apart, going, oh, I really like this part or whatever. But it had nothing to do with an audience. So that was a really hard thing for me to shift to, because I wasn't used to it. But then once I was, it was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And when I go in and start talking to my students about audience, who are you writing to? That's going to define what you're writing. Don't look at content until you know who you're writing to.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it becomes so much more important to be clear.
Absolutely.
I call it writing short, as opposed to somebody walking in saying, Sruti, give me a 7-page paper. I now no longer give any numbers. It takes a while for students to recognize that there is no nice little number over here. Yeah. I love when I tell my students, stop looking at the left-hand bottom corner of your screen, because you're looking at word count and I'm not giving you a word count.
Yeah.
But you're all used to doing that. So remember, there's a phrase we always talk about in class. Instead of saying due to the fact that, which is 5 words, you say because it's 1.
You literally taught the complete opposite in high school.
Exactly. Everybody wanted you to be dazzling. I'm like, that's great in high school.
Yes.
It's great for an English major, but it's not great for a business major.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that there's value in that, and it's not bad writing. It's just not like...
It's not business writing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have to be required to change your mindset. And so many students come in and go, I already had 2 writing classes. Why do I have to have another one? Because this is nothing like you've ever seen before.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes students have said in reviews, all we do is write emails. I'm like, that's all you're going to do for your entire career is write emails.
Yeah.
I mean, you might write some reports, but you're going to definitely be writing emails.
I remember towards the end of your class, we were kind of, wrapping the semester up, and you were like, now you guys might not want to delete these off your computer, because in 3 or 4 years, when you have to write your first request off for work or anything of that nature, you might want to pull back and see, oh, how did I learn to do that? What does that look like? So I am concise and to the point, and I feel like that was really kind of a breakthrough moment for me, where I was like, yeah, I'm going to listen to her. I'm going to save these and keep them just, to have in my back pocket. So I was kind of wondering, have you had any other of those light bulb moments or moments where students come back maybe a couple years later and say, wow, like this really changed the way that I do business in the day-to-day, and kind of what does that sound like from your students?
I have a handout that's a 3-page punctuation handout, as opposed to the normal handbook you get from professors. And if you're writing short and you're writing like 2-3 clause sentences, you can punctuate them. If you're only writing 5 in a paragraph, you should be able to punctuate that. I had a student who 2 years after he graduated wrote me and said, I've lost my punctuation handout. Could you send it? I use it every day I'm writing emails.
Guys.
I was like, thank you. Yay. So I'm always telling my students, don't lose this, but I will send another one to you if you need it. And it's one of those things I've had students say that for the first time ever, they actually understand how punctuation works. It doesn't have to do with breathing. It's not a pause.
My gosh, yes.
It's all about structure and what did you just put here and here.
Yeah.
What's in between them. And so if you start looking at it from that short, small piece, punctuation now suddenly makes sense.
Yeah.
And you're looking going, wow, there is a reason for a comma. Not just, I picked up my hand off the keyboard, therefore I have to have a comma.
Right.
Oh my gosh, yes, they tell you that.
I think that is probably one of the first times a lot of people and students are getting actual clear instructions for where do I put this and when do I put it there, and that just makes all the difference.
Yes, because sometimes commas really do say something. One of the things I sometimes put up for, it's called an Oxford comma, A, comma, B, comma, and C. So a lawyer was writing a will, and he said that Tom, comma, Dick, comma, and Harry were to divide this inheritance. If you have Tom, comma, Dick, comma, and Harry, they divide it in 3 pieces. But if you have Tom, comma, Dick and Harry don't get as much as Tom.
Oh my
because of the
gosh.
comma.
And that would make a huge difference. You would have
Even if
some
it's
unhappy
50 cents, it would make a difference. So if I start putting commas into those kinds of contexts, students are like, oh, there's a reason.
Yeah.
I might make some money. I can't even speak. Might make some money here if I get it. And it was actually a legal case where the 1 comma really did. It was a misstep. Somebody forgot to put the comma in, but then it was all signed and everything, and they didn't get what they were expecting.
That's wonderful. I think that it's so cool how like purposeful every word becomes when you're doing business writing. It kind of reminds me of like poetry. Like
Yes.
every word has
a meaning, and if one is left off, there's a reason for it to be left off. Yes,
Exactly.
yes. Although I've never put business writing and poetry together, I like your example.
Yes, I I came into like going into business writing, and I was not.
You were fighting it?
A little bit, if you will. I was fighting it a little bit. I always saw language as like melodic and like beautiful and like whatever it is. And so when I started to have to write plainly, I was just kind of like
But
this
why?
is, yes, literally, but why? Like there's no humanity in this. But then I was like, no, it is human, because the person that you're writing to will understand what you're saying, and that's human.
Exactly.
That's kind.
Exactly. And putting in adjectives or putting in descriptors are like, well, I'm describing this, but is that how someone else sees it?
Yes.
Maybe I need to back off and just give them the plain, straightforward.
And then I came to like, am I even using these words because I want them to understand it, or I'm just saying it for myself, that they'll know that I can use those adjectives.
Yeah, that
or
I'm
whatever.
smart.
Yes.
I can put this together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you're really good about business communication, it's always about the other, which is really hard because we've all been taught to think, I have to sound cool. I have to sound, so I use, the big words and all that. Because how many times have you heard somebody say, I don't care what it says, I like the way it sounds. I'm like, but what it says is really
Yes, exactly.
We're losing
Exactly. But those people who write for English professors or write for academic writers, and they're sitting there writing and they're going, I'm going to go find the synonym. That word's too small, or that word's too plain. I'll go find. And I'm like, yes, but you have to know that those words imply other things.
Yeah.
And most people don't have a good vocabulary to be able to say, this means this, and this only implies this. It doesn't actually say that. So.
It becomes a little selfish. Just like you were saying, like, you're writing for your teacher to be like your dad. You're trying to dazzle your teacher.
Exactly.
And then when you're in the real world, you're not trying to dazzle anyone. You're trying to get people to understand what you're saying.
Trying to get people to do business with you to make money.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that everybody kind of loses in this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, if clients don't understand what you're saying, can't read your proposal, don't understand how much your widgets cost.
Yes.
Why would they ever want to do business with you?
Absolutely.
Right.
So plain language is really a good thing for business.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, too, when we get to kind of flip that script after we do understand those concepts and think, how many times have I read an email and then at the end of it been questioning, what am I supposed to do with this? Why did they send that to me?
Yes.
I am totally lost. And then kind of seeing, you know, where that missing piece got lost throughout. So.
And the cool thing is, when you've done that, you can look back at your emails going, please, God, tell me I did not do that
Yes.
to somebody. Did I mess somebody up because I wasn't clear enough?
Yeah.
That's so not fair. Okay, we'll stop and we'll change the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the things that a lot of people don't even think about. They don't think that even in an email, you have an audience, whether it's one person or 15, and that audience is on the phone, looking at the screen, talking to somebody as they walk by, talking to somebody else, and they're still trying to read your email. And the beauty is, if you can do it short and to the point, they can do all that stuff at the same time and still be able to read your email.
You're being considerate of their time.
Exactly.
So you were talking about working as a sales content editor. Did you ever witness unethical writing and have to?
No, because part of what was going on was the company was really, it was looking at and saying, you can't do anything underhanded. You can't write this way. So it wasn't that, but in some respects, it was unethical in that it was wasting people's time because it was 400 pages or 700 pages, and you're sitting there going, really, do they even care?
Yeah.
So at that point, they're only reading the executive summary, which has to be good, but still, why did you just waste all the time to write 700 pages or even 50 pages if you didn't need it?
Yeah.
But I loved, there's an author who wrote How to Write Persuasive Proposals. His name's Tom Sand, and from reading him, I got into understanding about business communication. And one of the things he said was he would go into businesses and he would help them change their writing. And this one company every year got together. They put together this huge report, massive report in these huge binders. And he says, what do you do with them? Oh, we just put them over there. That's all they did, was they sat on top of a filing cabinet and no one ever looked at them again.
Wow.
You're sitting there going, and he was like, really? The amount of waste of your time.
Yeah.
Couldn't you, you're never getting that back if you do.
Right.
So they finally said, okay, this makes no sense. But it wasn't until somebody from outside gave them the perspective that says this doesn't work. From your perspective, you can see the value of language going, I know this, but I also know that I can make the choice not to use the cool sounding word, but to use the more plain word that everyone would understand.
Absolutely.
And that was what Tom Sant, the guy I was talking about, the author I was talking about, he said, make sure that everyone from the CEO down through the janitor can read your document and know it for the first and only time they read it. And I think that's a good thing to talk about.
So what do your BCom classes look like? Like, what are you looking to teach your students, and like how do the assignments, and like what does that look like?
Basically, I try and put it in the context of a structure. So if they're sending an email, the email is asking for time off, like you said. So how do you write that if you just got the job and yet your 90-year-old grandmother says you have to come to the family reunion? How do you write that? And then that's one of my assignments. But I also, at the beginning, do you mind if I start from the beginning? At the beginning, we go to do it just a self-profile. Tell me something about yourself, and they have to do it, but it's in 3 sentences, and they freak out because most people want to write 3 paragraphs. And so then we go to a summary of what their job experiences are, or their volunteer experiences, and then they go into an internship where they go and find an internship. Then they ask for, or they write a letter of application, and then they ask for a letter of recommendation from someone. So they're learning how to put all those employment things together. Did you do interview stream in our class?
Yes, I did actually.
We have a required interview stream where people have to do a video interview, which is a kind of weird thing that the Career Center has. It's not weird that the Career Center has it. It's a weird thing in that you only get the questions. You don't talk to anybody. You don't even see a human. And so students kind of freak out over, wait, but I'm like, this is the wave of the future because it's so cheap to interview people this way and to kind of go through the first round.
Yeah.
And then we pretend that after that, we pretend you've been hired. And so we are kind of like a business. And so everybody writes about a new intern, potentially about themselves. And then they write, do you remember the etiquette? We did a business etiquette, I guess we want to call it an assignment. Everybody, I think in your class, everybody was given a country. Do you remember that one? This is the one where you learned how to...
Yes.
The dining room.
And it was a project. It was with a partner?
With a partner,
Okay, yes, I do remember that.
And so we basically had... we get a bunch of countries, and then you have to go and learn the business etiquette of that country. And then you have to write it in a certain way. It's got a particular format, and then people have to present it. So there's an oral presentation where they teach us as if they're the experts from the company that's saying, hey, you're going to go do business. Here's what you need to do so you don't put your foot in your mouth before you even get there. So we talk about that. And then we have, we learn about bad news and how to write bad news letters. And we talk about an email chain where you're a corporate social responsibility coordinator, which means you get to choose the philanthropy or the charity that the company supports. And then you say, okay, we're going to do this. And then you write another email where you're inviting people to take part in an event that, like Habitat, where you're going to go build a house, but you're building it with your teammates from work. And then you write another email where you thank X number of people who came and what we all did. And then you have write a press release about that. And so you write as if you're writing not to the internal company, but literally external to the world in a sense. Did we do problem solving in your class where you had the annoying coworker?
Yes, we did. All of these are just coming back as we bring them up.
How do you solve the problem of an annoying coworker in a cubicle next to you? You've loved your job up until the moment they walked in. You're like, oh, God, I have to go in every day. And
How do you solve that problem?
Well, we argue in class, and then we say maybe taking them out to lunch just one-on-one and kind of talking to them about, well, when I was new, I did these silly things. So we kind of get them. So we get them into subtly. This idea. Yeah, we're trying to be very subtle and not confront them. But they have to explain it. What they're doing is the students are mentees writing to a mentor asking, hey, how do I solve this? And then the mentor writes back to them and says, why don't you take them to lunch? But there's a whole several pages about problem solving, about critical thinking, about being logical and how you approach all of that. So we do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we have fun with that one.
Yes. I love that.
And then we do, I don't think you did this in your class, we do a business plan now. And then we have the big project at the end. Everybody gets into teams, and then they create a company, and they create products. They have to describe them.
We did do that.
Did you that? Okay. They have to describe them. They have to write blogs, like web pages.
Yeah.
They have to do an about us story. How did they meet? So it's a big, huge project. And that's the end of the semester. They do a presentation, kind of like Shark Tank, where they come in and say, you have to buy this. Here, let me show you what it is. And they have a good time. So we have fun. That's the most creative. Because, let's face it, business writing is not creative.
Yeah.
Business writing is very specific.
Okay.
So I give them the creativity of, here, make up a character you're writing to, because that's the best I can do. Or make up a name for a company, because here's the creativity.
Right.
So
looking back, I don't think I realized how logical the order of the class was. But then when you were saying it, I was like, this is making a lot of sense. This is kind of the process we will be going through once we graduate. So yeah, I do think it's important that all people know that, not just business students or people who think they want to go into business, but really everyone, because that's the process we all go through. So that's crazy.
Maggie and I are both marketing majors, and so we're, like thinking about getting into the business and becoming a businesswoman. And I feel like this class has been, it's just made it like a lot less scary, I think. Yeah. Like it's really just showed me that like they're all just people. Like I'm just writing to a person. And I don't know, it's just been really sweet and cool to have this like experience to get into before I graduate. And
I think one of the things too is you have this sense of, hey, I know how to write.
Yeah.
I can sell that as my best tool in some respects.
Absolutely.
Especially for marketing. You need to be able to market, you need to be able to talk, you need to be able to communicate. But if you can walk in and say to your boss, hey, not only can I verbalize it, but I can write it, you're already...
jackpot.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. They're going, yay, somebody who can write.
Finally, yes.
Somebody who knows what's going on. So,
Yes, I think everyone should be... like, even if you're not in the business, like going into business, like you're going to have to write an email. You're going to have to write to somebody who needs to understand what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So through all of those assignments and projects, do you have a favorite that is your thing to cover?
It's probably the company development because we get to have so much fun naming things, putting together taglines, and it is very marketing oriented. But I come from, because I did the sales content editing, so I come from that. But it's also this idea of everything you do in life is marketing if you really think about it, because you're always on, you're always selling yourself, whatever.
Right.
Oh.
But we have fun just naming things. Yeah. And, talking about controversies in the industries that we're in. And so, we have a good time. I think that's my favorite. But the way things work, everybody's done everything once before. All the pieces of the assignment have already been done before. And so now they get to do it and put it together and see it as a package.
Yeah. I feel like most business communications teachers they have some kind of history or background in English, and I don't know, I think that having that is like kind of the propeller of like, but plain language is actually really important too. And it's really cool to see someone know and love creative writing and also be like, but this is really important too.
Right, because you can't just know writing and then walk in and start teaching it. You have to know how to break information down so that you can talk about sentence structure. You can talk about, here's an independent clause, guys, and you don't need to have 16 independent clauses right after each other. You need to start thinking about, but if you can't break it down, you can't teach it. So that's part of why we looked for people who had a writing background or at least an English background so that they could bring in that idea of, hey, we know how to do this. We know how to teach this.
Yes. Before we head out, we wanted to ask if you had one piece of advice that you would tell someone going into business.
Let me think. Probably always think about your audience. That you are not, I loved when you said you're writing to a human on the other side of that screen. There is a human there, and that human is doing 16,000 things at the same time that they're trying to read something that you've given them. If you take that into account, people are going to be much more inclined to listen to what you're saying about business or to do business with you. So if you don't think about your audience, you're always going to think about yourself. That's never going to sell anything.
So good.
That is. Well, thank you so much. It has been a joy to get to know you better
and
kind of hear about your background and learn all of those things. So thank you all for listening to us. I'm Maggie Malcolm.
And I'm Sruti Sajja, and this has been the Business Bobcast.